Today we're talking about, is it time for a break? And in case you don't know me already, I'm Sarah Olivieri. I'm a former executive director, #1 international best-selling author, founder of PivotGround, and creator of the Impact Method. And I love helping nonprofits change the way they operate so they can make a bigger impact without getting overwhelmed and burning out. And one of the keys to not burning out is being able to take a break for executive directors, leadership, and everybody who works in your organization. Now, I have to say, I have never read a book or been to a training myself where they talked about figuring out really just how do you plan breaks for yourself, for everybody, what should you consider? And I know there are a lot of people taking breaks right now. It's common to take some time off in the summer, but let's talk about how you can really do it well. There are 3 things that you need to consider to really take your break, to take great breaks, to get everybody rested as possible. And I'm going to go over each of these things in this micro training. The first is you need to consider individuals' needs. Do they need a break? Where are they on that continuum? You need to think about timing. What's going on? Can we time this so it's not so disruptive? And you need to think about your approach. How are you and everybody else going to make sure they get their time for some respite? Now, I like to call in the Impact Method, we call it respite rather than a break or a time off. And I like to say the respite is part of the work, or the rest is part of the work, because so much of what we need to do in our organizations is think. And if we don't rest, we don't think well. And oftentimes, while we're resting, we start to have great, incredible ideas that move us forward. So let's talk about that personal need, right? If we think of a spectrum here, on one end, you're vivacious. You have all the energy that you need. Your spirits are high. Your creative juices are flowing. You're like, I'm gonna go. I'm having such a great time. And on the other hand, you're feeling, at the other end of the spectrum, you're feeling burnt out. You're tired. You're having trouble thinking. Tasks are starting to take longer. Maybe you're making mistakes, although often when you're so burnt out, if you're really at the end of the spectrum, you're making mistakes, but you don't realize that you're making mistakes. So here's what you need to do along this spectrum. If you have managed to reach burnout without having already proactively addressed it, you need to take a break. Because if you're at the point where you're not working well, you're either kind of breaking even, you're not doing more good, you're doing equal parts good and harm, or you could be doing more harm than good. And it's a better use of your time and energy to be taking a break. Ideally though, before this kind of becomes top priority and gives you no wiggle room in the other 2 things that we're factoring in, that we're gonna cover, you should, if you're totally vivacious, you can just keep going. If you have time to plan a break, add that into your schedule. Schedule your strategy, your tactics, add planning, how to take a break, and when that break is going to happen into your schedule. So soon as you start to drift anywhere in the middle, plan a break. It is way more efficient to plan a break that will happen before you reach the point of burnout than it is to actually get to the point of burnout and have to take an unplanned break. But if you get there that you're burned out, what are you going to do? You're going to take an unplanned break because you need it. If you are a leader, which many of you are, and you see your employee doing the martyr thing, which you're probably doing yourself, and they're starting to be overtired, making mistakes, things are taking too long, mistakes that they don't usually make, go to them and tell them they have to take some time off. That's a great role that you can play for your team. So the next thing we need to think about is timing. And the mistake that I see a lot of people making here is they focus mostly on seasonal timing, but primarily you want to prioritize the rhythm of your own organization. And you can either pick some downtime that happens naturally in your cycle of programming, or you can create some downtime by planning ahead. Now, it's extra beneficial to leverage the seasonal timing. So let's say you're going to intentionally design your programmatic timing so that its natural, sort of its downtime falls at the same time as, say, the winter holidays or summer August time. So if it makes sense and you can do that, then that will be really great. But if you can't, if that doesn't make sense, don't take off in the summer just because everybody else is. So what do I mean by downtime in the program cycle? And for those of you who are here live, if you want to put in now what kinds of services you offer, I'll try to give you an example specifically for your type of organization. And for those of you who are watching the replay, you can feel free to leave a comment and we'll try to get back to you with some examples if we haven't covered them here. So let's say you have an organization that has educational programs, right? So you're probably marketing those programs, you know, you're making a plan for your marketing and then you're doing the marketing. If you're not doing it this way, you need to do it this way. We can talk about that separately. So you make a plan for how you're going to get enrollment into your programs. Then you execute that plan, then you hold the program, then you do kind of your wrap-up evaluation piece, and then you're ready to start the cycle anew. So when in that kind of situation, what's a good time to take a break? Well, ideally, after your program has finished and after you've done your review and gotten your key takeaways, that's a great time to plan in some space to take a break. If you've planned your marketing, you might have a moment after you created the plan, but before you start executing the plan, you can build in a great moment there. Or if your plan is pretty much on, your marketing plan runs on autopilot, which it probably doesn't, you could potentially take a break off there. Otherwise, surprisingly, once your educational programming begins is probably when a segment of the marketing and planning administrative people can actually take their time. Once it's launched and running, you could take some time then. So similar, I see example of higher education, right? You're following the academic year. Where I see a lot of people, particularly in schools, I don't know if this happens in higher ed, but I definitely see it happening with school administrators at the secondary ed high school level, is they think August, they want to take a quick break before the school year begins. But usually they're actually in their enrollment phase if they need to increase enrollment right up until school begins and then one or 2 months into the school year. So that is not a good time for a school administrator or anybody who's involved with the school marketing to be taking off. So don't use up all your juice and then kind of flap around in the summer if you're a school, because your summer you should be targeting a lot of marketing activities to make sure you tie up those last enrollment spots. I'm going to move ahead because I didn't see any more examples. I'm happy to talk about them at the end. So how do you and your team take time off? So there's 3 approaches, and these are, I think, in the order that I think they're most effective. So the most effective would be if your organization can basically plan a time when the organization can shut down completely or mostly. That's ideal, and then everybody can take time off at once. It might seem not feasible to you right now, and if you run 24-hour programs that happen year-round, you're not going to be able to do this completely. But the closer you can get to this, the more effective the time off is, because work isn't building up while people are taking time off. So it's a real cognitive break, and then there's no kind of mountain in starting back up again. Another approach, if you can't quite go organization-wide, is to have staggered groups. So maybe half of each department, or there's whole kind of departments who can take off one at a time. So maybe if you're a school program, right, marketing gets the school year going and then can take a break, and then but the teachers have to keep going, but then the teachers can take a break and marketing's coming back. So something like that. And then finally, if you can't do big groups like that, you can stagger everybody's time off. So only one or a few people, depending on how big your organization is, can take off at a time. And basically the organization doesn't feel, doesn't change its level at which it's operating, but everybody's getting some time off. Many organizations assume that this is the only way they can do it, but I really encourage you to think creatively, think about how you can leverage planning ahead to get closer to the organization-wide type time off. So I just wanted to give you an example of what's our ideal, right? Now, not everybody can get here, and many people can't get all the way here, but it's a great kind of vision to start to work towards. So that you plan a break, we're planning ahead, we're not waiting till we get burnt out. We're planning a sufficient amounts of breaks. In the impact method, besides any personal vacation time, we've actually built in 4 weeks of respite into the method itself. It's required respite, and it can be taken in any one of those 3 ways. The whole organization-wide, staggered groups, or staggered by individual. But plan ahead so that you're taking a break before you're so burnt out that you're not effective. Do it by creating programmatic downtime intentionally. Build that in, and if possible, build it in during a common season for vacations. And ideally, get your staff's input. Ask when they would most like to have this most valuable type of time off. And have the entire team take the break together to the maximum extent possible. As usual, if you'd like to talk about this topic one-on-one with me, you can apply for a call, pivotground.com/apply. Or if there's any other topic you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation with me about, you are welcome to use that as well.